Hello, my name's Osha. I like talking about American presidents, how to pronounce. Today I'm going to be talking about um, family, not so much about presidents. Well, I'm going to, just, you know, chip in something about presidents. I'm doing this because one of my favorite actors, Robert Duvall, he passed yesterday at the age of 95 years old. May his soul rest in peace. And there have been all sorts of tributes, going out to him. And it's kind of very interesting that, you know, it was like I always remember Robert Duvall for playing Tom Hagen in The Godfather. He was the consigliere, that's the counselor, the lawyer for Don Corleone, for the Corleone family. And I've mentioned before in an earlier video that I'd read the book The Godfather when I was a kid, and Francis Ford Coppola, the director, did an amazing job. All the actors did an amazing job, and of course, The Godfather is classic, right, in Hollywood uh, movies, and yeah. So Robert Duvall, it's kind of interesting that he died just about a year after Gene Hackman, right? And I'd gone to find out that Gene Hackman also died February 18, 2025, last year, and may his soul rest in peace. He also died at the age of 95 years old. Gene Hackman is another favorite of mine. He was in The Firm with Tom with Tom Hanks. He's done so many movies, and I know he's constantly playing the bad guy. So these two great actors, it turns out, have been friends for 70 years. Gene Hackman and Robert Duvall actually had been roommates and been classmates in acting school in 1955. They went to the same acting school in New York City, acting conservatory. I think it's called Neighborhood Theater or something in New York City. Dustin Hoffman was also their classmate, and Dustin Hoffman had also been roommate with Robert Duvall as well. So it's kind of very interesting. Robert Duvall kept acting. He kept doing movies in his 80s. Another actor that I found very interesting, who I really liked, was Christopher Plummer. It's been quite a while, I think about 5 years since he passed. He also passed in February. So there's something about some of these actors with longevity who pass in February. Christopher Plummer kept acting as well. He was 91 when he died, and you'll never believe he didn't die from illness. He died from a broken neck from a fall, which is kind of tragic. He was in the middle of an acting project. So it's good to have longevity in what you do, and it's good to have your friends and family. So Gene Hackman and Robert Duvall had been very good friends. Interesting, James Kane or James Caan, who was Sonny in Godfather. He'd been in the same class as Robert Duvall as well, so they'd all been in the same class. So it's funny that they got a job together in The Godfather, and so they were friends, before the movie. So it's kind of it's interesting. But the movie consider the fact that Robert Duvall passed at 95 and he kept working into old age. I saw a documentary, an interview uh, on him when he was still in his 80s and he was still acting. And he said, "Look, that as long as he has life and he can do it, he'll keep acting. He'll keep working. Living life to the fullest." Uh, I'm mentioning this now because I've been doing videos. The reason why I started doing these videos is because I didn't want to waste my life. Right, I've been held hostage in the state of Maryland, the racist state of Maryland, for the past 3 years, and it's going on 3 year going. It looks like it's going to be going on 4 years now. And my mother's 5 years old. Sorry, 85 years old, and I haven't seen my mother since 1999. I didn't know that the last time I'd see my father would be at the airport in 1999 when he went with me, and he passed, in his 80s, all of a sudden, in 2018 while I was in law school, and that shocked me. So I haven't been with my family in Nigeria because, I was focused on career. That's why I came to America. I came to America as a young man. Of course, my parents sponsored me to come to America. My late father and my parents sponsored me to come to America, despite all the responsibilities they've had. Because my parents didn't just raise their own children, right? They raised their siblings, their younger siblings, their their siblings' children. These people all grew up in my home, right? Went through my home. My parents raised them, paid for their education, and I've been doing these videos talking about how I was, without my rights as an American citizen, my rights as a human being were violated by Montgomery County Police uh, on false allegations, false pretenses by an impersonator called Jide Wariri. This guy is a Howard University professor, and he lied. He filed an emergency evaluation petition. That's something that your family can do. My family's in Nigeria, and they never gave me a hearing or notice, and I was assaulted in my home. These stitches are there permanently now from where the police shot me in the head, and it's left permanent scarring from the stitches. And I was dehumanized, removed naked in handcuffs. I'd never been handcuffed before in my life. They didn't tell me why they were there. They assaulted me, injured me, tear gassed my apartment. And it turned out that Jide Wariri, this man, had gone to lie, file a petition, lying that I threatened to shoot him and that I was, I called my home a military base. The attorney he hired claims he said that I had bombs and I was going to bomb people. So all sorts of lies. So the police came like a military force, lethal force, falsely imprisoning me, right, without an arrest warrant, nothing, because it was supposed to be like a danger, threatening situation. So Jide Wari made a hoax call. Him and some people, right? He made a hoax call, right, spreading false information, giving false information to the courts, and so Montgomery County Police came to raid me. Just because I dropped the phone on him, right? I had a dispute with him. It wasn't even a major dispute. I was just setting boundaries for him the previous day. I said, hey, I don't want you to come to my home, right? You need to respect that. Now he goes to lie to the police that I threatened to shoot him. If I really told somebody that I was going to shoot him, told Jide Wire that I was going to shoot him, how did he have the effrontery? And if he believed it, why did he come back the next day and knocked on my door? And the police didn't come and get me then, right? So you see that these were all lies, fabrications, and then the police defamed me by saying that, well, I threatened to shoot Jide Wari. Well, I've been waiting for the trial because they offered me a plea bargain, and I came to see the injustices in the system. I've done videos about the injustices, the public corruption in the Montgomery County State Attorney's office, corruption amongst judges like Judge James Bonifant. I'm not going to discuss that here. I want to talk about my family and my understanding of family life and how the state of Maryland, which has a racist and slaveholding legacy, and it has a history of dehumanizing Black people and separating Black families like it did during slavery. And you know, of course, no, I'm not a slave. Nothing compares. But it's the state of Maryland has dehumanized me in the way it's held me hostage. It conjured up a man who's not my family, who's not my uncle, and they kept insisting that he's my family for almost 2 years. The judge kept saying it was my family that sent the police to come and apprehend me. When I was first locked up in jail, what they told me was that it was my family that filed this petition saying that I had changed. So all I was thinking was my mother back home in Nigeria, my siblings, did they file anything? Turns out it was none of them. Those people didn't even know where I was. They had no idea what was going on. It was this man called Jide Wariri, there's no consanguinity between us. He's not my family. He's one who had gone to file a false petition and committed perjury. and sent the police to my home, made false accusations that I threatened to shoot him, and called my home a military base. All fabrications. And I haven't had my right to talk, my right to speak, to be heard, part of natural principles of natural justice. That's audi alteram partem, a right to be heard. That's been denied. I was never given notice of the emergency petition he filed. I was never given a hearing to dispute it, or call witnesses on my behalf, to call my family. I was never given an impartial judge. And this is going on 3 years now, right? So now, what's ironic is that the police who assaulted me, injured me, dehumanized me, they bruises, injuries all over my body from the way they brutalized me. They now claim I assaulted them when they're far away. Okay, let's have a trial. They haven't shown any evidence of how I assaulted them. The evidence they've provided only shows them assaulting me. But I've done videos discussing this. So now what I just want to talk about is family, and you know uh, how the state of Maryland has violated my rights to family, my family rights, with these trumped up charges, and with the defamatory emergency petition it authorized, using a man impersonating as my family when he's not. My mother's 85 years old. The state of Maryland has abused my mother, who all the way in Nigeria. She's insisted every evaluation that Judge Bonifant, the fraudulent evaluations he's ordered. My mother has appeared. The evaluation that Julie Smith did, another doctor, Michael Mintz, my brother, my mother, they appeared. And they will deceive my family. They'll tell my family, oh, they don't see anything. My family will tell them, no, I don't have any history of mental illness. They don't see anything, because we were in conversation, we were in communication. I was planning on coming home that May. I'd requested from the Auditor General that, okay, I want to use my vacation time to travel, that I was coming home. My niece, I had plans for my niece. I have nieces that I was taking care of, that a niece I was taking care of, another niece I promised to take care of, right? So in my culture in Nigeria, Yorubas, we take care of our family. It's not like Nigeria that's it has this nuclear family and everybody's very individualistic. And when adults grow up, their parents, they put them in a hospice or something, in an old people's home, and leave them to rot away, right? That's not how we do in Nigeria, right? We show gratitude. Of course, we don't have safety nets, social security, or things like that in Nigeria, but we show our love for our parents because they live with us. We take care of them. They live in our homes. As they get older, they play with their grandchildren and things like that. And we take care of our siblings. My mother raised her siblings, right? All her siblings, younger sisters. My mom was the firstborn. All her younger siblings lived in my father's house and were raised by my mother sometime. And my mother sent them to school, right? Educated them, including this woman, Bumi Wariri. That's the Jide Wariri. My mother sent her to school, paid for everything, paid for Jide Wariri's wedding, right? We didn't know who he was, where he came from. Apparently, he was a gold digger, right? Because my dad was a bank CEO, and he obviously was a gold digger at that time when he came around. My mother treated Bumi Wariri like her younger sister. The woman who, with her husband, have abused me and almost had me killed by making false allegations against me with Montgomery County Police, which raided me, and the Montgomery County now has deprived me of my rights for 3 years now, because they've lived in Montgomery County for about 40 years. Their residents, their children are there. So they have this long established history, roots there. And they abused these roots, right, to violate my rights and to dehumanize me and to deprive my family in Nigeria, right, of the care that I can provide for them. That I'm now in a position. I was now in a position to be able to support my siblings, my nieces in Nigeria, right? I remember that in May, around April, May to 2023. Because when you become a citizen, right, they ask you if you want to adopt somebody who's under 18. Anybody you want to adopt, you can put them. You can put them on your list, and then they can become automatic citizens, right? And I hadn't, because when I became a citizen, there was just so much going on, and I didn't even invite anybody. I didn't even let anybody know. So I didn't realize my niece, that whom I had promised to adopt since she was born, right? I didn't realize she was still under 18. I didn't know she was still, under 18 years old. So when I realized, and she didn't show any interest anymore in, like, she liked Nigeria, so I was very proud of her for that. She was like, nah, she doesn't really want to come to America like that. She likes Nigeria, but she wanted to come to school here. So I promised her that, okay, I will sponsor you for your education. So she did very well, graduated excellent. I think she was first class in she had a first class in bachelor's. Very brilliant girl, and no, she's not a girl anymore. She's now a woman. She's a lady, and at the time I was assaulted, I just told her she was looking for schools in the US. And I promised I was going to support her. Um, and I remember when I told Jide Ware's wife about my intent to support her. And she said in a very hostile manner that, why do I want to do that? Am I her father? Why do I want to do that? I shouldn't, And I thought about it because I knew Bose Ware herself. I didn't find out until later on that she was actually my mother's half sister. I had always assumed they're full sisters, but she was my mother's half sister. My mother sent her to school, paid for all her education in Nigeria, and she lived in my parents' house, right? My parents supported her. So it's astonishing that somebody who herself was supported, when they come to America, they become so selfish, right? And they forget where they came from, how they too were supported back home. So I'm not God, and I guess my niece knows what I'm going through. She's graduated now, and it pains me. I have another and I have another niece from my first cousin. I guess she's my cousin. I call her my niece. She calls me her uncle. My first cousin's daughter. So my late first cousin, Professor Pius Adesomi, who was director of the Institute of Israel and sorry, he was director of the Institute of African Studies at Carleton University in Canada. He had died in was it March 10, 2019, in the fatal Ethiopian uh, Airlines flight, the plane crash, Ethiopian Airlines, on his way to an African Union conference. And he was a prolific writer. He wrote Nigeriano de Carry Last amongst his numerous books. And his niece, I've missed her birthdays, birthday after birthday, birthday after birthday. Now she's a teenager because of the trumped up charges against me. And I see how America has the worst carceral system in the world. It's like America just imprisons its citizens, especially if they're minorities, if they're blacks. And it's still a legacy from slavery, right? So from its slavery and Jim Crow past. America is about a third of China, but America has more people under the carceral system than China. And America is supposed to be land of the free. A not insignificant number of people who are under America's carceral system are innocent because our standard is innocent until proven guilty. The state of Maryland filed false charges against me. They had no arrest warrants. It was based on false allegations. So you see the perversion of justice, that anybody can just tell a lie. And we have a crooked criminal justice system, racist cops. Jide Wariri knew that the cops were racist when he sent them to my home. I lived alone in my home, and they could have killed me. And now they've placed me under their corrupt system and separated me from my family that's in Nigeria. And the state of Maryland for 2 years was misrepresenting Jide Ware as my family. Jide Ware is not my family. He's never been my family. There's no consanguinity between us, right? I have no relationship like that with him. It was a time when I wanted to go back to Nigeria. Uh, and my father found out I hadn't actually gone to law school, and he knew that was my dream. So Jide Wari was the one who went to go and meet my dad because my dad paid for his wedding, helped him come to America, um, that I should stay with him. My father could have afforded to pay for me to stay, to stay in an apartment, right? But um, Jide Wari went to meet him that I should stay with him. Now I stayed with him, but Jide Wari and his wife placed me in a storage room, had me sleeping on the floor in a storage room, right? And I did that for 3 years. So I guess he wanted to make me inured to hardship. But I remember, how dehumanized I felt. But I'm not somebody. I'm not a complainer, and for me, look, um, I take things as they come, right? I don't over personalize things, and I worked my way out of that condition. But I never told my parents, so my parents didn't know that this guy had me sleeping on the floor in a storage room for 3 years, and this was when I was like over 40 years old. I'd been married, I'd had my own place before all of that, but the reason was, he wanted me to, uh, you know, so so when that happened, I remember after that I asked my mother that when my aunt, when her younger sister lived with us, we lived in Ikoyi at the time. She lived at her place in Ikoyi in Lagos, Nigeria. I asked, um, "Did you have her sleeping on the floor?" My mom said never. That she had her own room. My mom said she treated her like she was her first child. Um, and I remember growing up. Yeah, my mom had a staff of like 10 people, at least 10 people in the house, 10 staff, right? And so she didn't do anything. But here they were now abusing me. And, no big deal. So these were the people now claiming they were my family. When they had me locked up, when the state of Maryland locked me up in the hospital, not once did they come and see me, not their children, nobody. 6 months before they assaulted me, I had bought Christmas gifts for all their children and their kids, right? And you see, so I there was something I learned that okay, because they're the ones who invite me for Christmas all the time. If I don't go, they get offended. That's my aunt, and I felt sorry for her. But there's sometimes that some people you have to avoid. You have to learn to avoid, or they're gonna kill you. They're gonna destroy you. They just want to be close to you so they can learn how to sabotage you, and that's what I learned from the Iwaris, right? So what they did doesn't matter because God has saved me. I'm a man who is a person of faith, and both my parents, people of faith. My father was, and so is my mom. So my life is preserved, but not being able to help my mother who's 85, and I think about my mother. When I have an opportunity to do things for her, how the state of Maryland has prevented me from being able to, see my mother, for her to be able to see her son. And my mom, when they postponed, and the evil judge, James Bonifant, postponed the trial again, that's all he's been doing. It's a malicious prosecution, right? They can't win a case, right? Because they're false charges. Instead of dismissing it, my mother, you know, lamented that, well, she thinks she may never see me again. And so that bothered me. She's 85 years old. And although I'm very blessed that my mom's not ill, her mind's sharp and all of that stuff, when she falls ill, I mean, she doesn't have like Alzheimer's, that's what I mean. But when something little happens, I get worried. I get very worried. And I'm here in America, held hostage, held captive by the state of Maryland, land of the free. There's fundamental racism in certain parts of America. Now, Bostonians, Massachusetts, I didn't experience the racism I experienced in Maryland. Maryland is a fundamentally racist state, right? Um, at least Montgomery County is. My rights uh, have been denied. I've been deprived of my rights. When the police came to my home, they actually committed robbery under color of law because they stole my certificate of naturalization. It's a felony. They denied it. They stole cash from my home, my luxury items. They stole things from my home and they denied it. And then they used my debit card to withdraw cash from my bank account, right? And I reported this to the FBI, the Department of Justice, and we just see it's like uh, there's a word in English called activism. I guess like a throwback, harks back. It just goes back to throwback to something evil. This is what the same uh, racist law enforcement did. Uh, in Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the people who uh, raided and killed and lynched black people at Tulsa, uh, in Oklahoma in 1921, the Tulsa Massacre, race riot, they call it. They were law enforcement, and law enforcement led them. And the way they came to my home, they came like a lynch mob. And so when I think about the way I've been separated from my family, separated, denied an opportunity to maintain a family life because of these trumped up charges, because of the carceral system in Montgomery County, Maryland. It just makes me think, because of course I miss my family, right? Think I consider those Africans in the 17th century who were kidnapped. You know, we didn't have like a breeding a breeding ground, a field breeding slaves in Africa. Like the people, when they talk about the African slaves, they make it seem like they were slaves in Africa. No, some of these people were kings, children of, they had lives, they were farmers, they were professionals, they had things they were doing, they were artisans, and they were kidnapped. Women were kidnapped, their children never saw them again. They left children behind, they left brothers, siblings, sisters, fathers, mothers behind, and they're taken away to just be the property of white people. And all they were left to do, their existence was just to produce for somebody else, use their physical labor for somebody else, to produce for somebody else, to entertain somebody else, other human beings. The agency was stripped. They were now chattel slavery. So a nation that has this mindset, they're inured to, they deprive people their humanity, their feelings, their emotions, their family lives, just because of the color of their skin or where they come from. They're used to doing this. It's in the system. That's when they talk about structural racism. That's part of what it is. So you can see how, you know, it doesn't move the state of Maryland, the judge, the state attorney, even though they know I'm an innocent man, it doesn't move them that I have family in Nigeria, that I have things to do. I was locked up for 15 months, placed under house arrest for a year. It doesn't move them. And I'm a middle-aged man. I spent 16 years in the university. So, I spent time working. It wasn't because I was trying to avoid work or trying to avoid family life. No. I come from a culture that, you prepare yourself and establish yourself, do what you're supposed to do so you can provide for a family. So I was now in a position, I had an excellent job. I acquired a six-figure job. I'd achieved top secret clearance, TSSCI, right? That's an achievement. It's an accomplishment in the Department of Defense. And I wasn't born here, right? That says the United States government trusts me with very sensitive information. The Department of Defense, the strongest military in the world, right? So they see me as a responsible person. And it was time for me to help my family, my nieces, you know. But the state of Maryland, because they're so racist, they don't care. They want to deprive me of that dignity, the responsibility, the humanity, just strip me of my human rights, my dignity, and defaming me. I've been defamed for 3 years now. I have a right to defend my reputation, my family's reputation. I've been denied that. But you see, a nation so used to dehumanizing black people because of their race, that's a state, the state of Maryland, because not everywhere. This wasn't my experience when I lived in Massachusetts, right? I loved Massachusetts. I loved New York. But Maryland, nah, it's so it's just kind of astonishing. Now I said that I like talking about American presidents, so I've talked about the personal side um, of my case because I'm using my case in Maryland as a case study, right? Um, so let me talk about the side of presidents, and family life. Our first president, of course, George Washington, never had biological children, but he had, a stepson. His wealthy wife, right, did have a son, and he was like a father to that, uh, uh, to his wife's son. And of course, he was like a father to Alexander Hamilton, right, his first secretary of the Treasury, and who was chief of staff to him as well when he was commanding general of the Union of the Revolutionary Armies, the Continental Army. Um, Now, of course, um, since what I'm talking about is well, it's not tragic now, but it's um, is it disheartening. Let me talk more about the disheartening aspects of family in the White House. Abraham Lincoln, of course, my favorite president. He buried, he had a son. He lost a son while he was in the White House. I think he lost it in his lifetime. Before he died, he lost, I think, at least two kids. And there was a president who all his children died before he got into the White House. That's William McKinley, our 25th president. He had two daughters, and both of them died before he got into the White House, and they never had kids again. And of course, McKinley himself, unfortunately, was assassinated by an anarchist. Um, Teddy Roosevelt's wife, his first wife, had died. Um, and Franklin Pierce, unfortunately, he lost some kids as well. And one died very tragically in a train accident on the eve, of his inauguration, just before he was inaugurated, after he won the presidency. And his son was, I think he was even decapitated in the train accident. And so it was a very tragic experience for him. So he had no children again because, his children died. President Calvin Coolidge's son died while playing in the White House lawn. When, his son died. I think he had an injury, sustained an injury, and he died while in the White House. That's President Calvin Coolidge, um, who was our 30th president. And who else? Many presidents never had children officially. Warren G. Harding didn't have children officially, but it turned out there was a woman he had who had a child for him out of wedlock. This was only discovered after he died, and it was discovered that he had been paying child support to the woman. Uh, James Polk never had children. He had a terrible illness. I think he had an operation, some kind of operation due to illness when he was young, and it's speculated that it may have made him sterile, or you know. So that's President James Polk, the one responsible for the Mexican American War. Um, of course, James Buchanan was a lifelong bachelor. He never married. So there have been tragedies. Um, there have been tragic experiences. Andrew Jackson never had biological kids, and of course, his wife died of heartache, pain, uh, because she was scandalized and ridiculed, called a bigamist after he'd won the presidency. And when she died, Andrew Jackson declared that he would never forgive his enemies who he thought caused her death. So Andrew Jackson never had biological children. Um, yeah. James Madison never had biological children. It's speculated that um, he had a slave woman was his half sister and may have had children with him. Well, that's not being substantiated. However, the president who had the most children was John Tyler. I think he had about 15 or so, or 10, maybe 50. He had many children, but John Tyler had the most children of any American president, I think. Yeah. Was it John Tyler or William Henry Harrison? I think it was John Tyler. I'll check. I'll verify and make that correction. In any event, let me stop this video here, of course, and it was about me hoping I'll be able to fulfill my duties to my mother and my family, my nieces, who are growing to be young women, and many promises I'd made to them. And they're brilliant, but God is in control. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.